What's up guys, JV2017 here, and today I wanted to share a few tips that I've picked up while playing the new survival mode beta for Fallout 4. And I've had a chance to sink a few hours into the new mode, and it is as brutal as ever. If people were complaining about the game not being hard enough, this is what you get. This is very difficult. It's just a new way to play the game. And before we jump in, I made a video yesterday going over the basics of this beta, so if you're unfamiliar, feel free to check that out in the description below. There is a link for you. So my overall perspective on the survival mode overhaul so far is that it requires the player to really rethink and reevaluate the way they play the game. It really requires an active mind. You know, you have to worry about sleeping, hunger, thirst, fatigue, illness, all of these things you have to worry about now in order to survive. Now, it's not that it's an impossibly entirely hard game mode that, you know, is just unfair or anything like that. It just requires an active mind. You have to be an active participant when playing the game. You have to think about all these things. And I think these tips are designed to keep you thinking while you play. First off, settlements, settlements, settlements. They are more important than they've ever been because these are hubs where the player, the sole survivor, can sleep, eat, drink, and visit a doctor to recover if you need something like that. If you need a doctor, if you've contracted some kind of illness from a mole rat hitting you, giving you parasites, something like that, you know, all of these things you can find in a lot of the settlements in the game. There's 30 settlements, actually now 31 with Automatron, scattered about the Commonwealth. They are everywhere, and I was always wondering why the hell are there so many? Now there are plenty and they are useful, so don't take them for granted. Since you can't fast travel or save in this game mode manually, it's a good idea to know where all of these settlements are so you can string them together like checkpoints. These are safe havens, hubs where you can truly feel safe and do what you need to do to prepare yourself to go out and do some questing, kill some enemies, whatever. And I've been playing a lot of Dark Souls lately, and this really reminds me of the bonfires in Dark Souls. If you die in that game, you're, sent back to the most recent bonfire that you sat at. It's kind of like settlements in that sense, but you can save with beds, and that's something we'll talk about towards the end of the video. The next thing I have to share with you guys is really about character building and perk choice. So when you're building your character with their special, all the choices you make with that, and even the level to level choices that you make, even if you're taking a high level character into survival mode for the first time, all of these choices are very important. You have to think about, is this perk more valuable than another perk? It's all about opportunity cost. With this level, is it more important to take, an endurance-based perk or a charisma-based perk? And in my opinion, so far in my experience, dealing damage is not the most important thing anymore. That used to be the most important thing to me. Some people may disagree, but I always wanted to deal the most damage. That's how most of my characters were built around. I don't think that's the thing anymore because, damage functions a lot differently than it did before. We deal more damage, but our enemies deal more damage as well. So you have to think about that and factor that into your perk choice. And for example, charisma-based perks probably are less important this time around. It depends on your character, but in general, charisma-based perks make things easier, kind of like shortcuts, like you can get your way out of a situation, you won't have to deal with something. I think that in general, charisma-based perks, for example, are going to be less important, less of a priority, whereas, the endurance tree, I think, really shines in survival. A lot of the perks in that category that were maybe not that useful or more convenience, based, like Aqua Boy, for example, or Lead Belly, which I thought was an awful perk. Lead Belly is quite useful in this mode. It just makes sense for this mode. It seems like it was almost tailored for this mode. So I'm just getting you guys to think about these endurance perks you may not have taken before are going to suddenly be viable in survival mode. Next is looting, and I know a lot of people are probably used to picking up everything because they've got a big strength, based character with strong back. You can pick up everything. You don't have to worry about that. That's a really passive way to play because you just pick up everything. You're like, I can, deal with it. I got carrying weight, all of that. The problem is that carrying weight has been reduced significantly. I had 250 carry weight before with one character with only 3 strength, and then it was knocked down to 130. That's pretty much half of the carry weight I had before. That's crazy. And also our companions carry less for us. You can't rely on companions nearly as much as you could before. Additionally, we have resources that have weight now. We have ammunition having weight. Mini nukes and missiles weigh 12 and 7 pounds. A lot of the other, different kinds of ammo has different weights. You have to worry about all of that, and it just doesn't make sense anymore to pick up everything you see in sight. Just some things I thought about. Weapons and armor alone can weigh you down about 100 pounds, maybe even more, a little bit less. It really does matter what kind of mods you place on your weapons and armor. For example, if you make a really beefy, combat rifle, for example, it could weigh 12 pounds. And then if you add a sidearm onto that, you're wearing some really heavy armor, that can all weigh you down, and suddenly you don't have a lot of room for anything else. You can't pick up a lot else. So you really have to think about which mods you're placing on your items with those workbenches. Strength in general also has to become more important than it was before, because strength determines carrying weight. And if you can't carry a lot of items, it really does hamper the experience, since you can't just fast travel back and forth to drop off your items. I think carrying weight is a lot more important. It is a lot more convenient, actually. I think it is more of a convenience thing, but seriously, you're not going to want to spend a ton of time going back and forth between places to drop off stuff. Another thing people have to consider is the way they play the game in terms of a combat play style. And the honest thing is that some engagements are not going to be worth it. If you're going up against something that is 5 levels above you, it's probably not going to be worth it. And you have to make that decision to decide when it's worth it to fight or when it's worth it to flee and run away and come back and try to kill that thing later. We have lower enemy and loot repopulation, which means if you kill something, you can't just return to kill it over and over and over. So you are being forced to explore and find new things. But if you come across something like, for example, awareness is probably a lot more useful now, because you can look and see what the resistances of that enemy are, what their level is, and make an informed decision like, hey, should I run away from this or should I stay and do this? You know, you have to ask yourself, will this animal bite me and give me an infection? How far am I away from a doctor or a chemistry bench, you know, that can give me antibiotics, or, you know, that I can craft my own antibiotics? So these are all things that you have to take into consideration. And if it wasn't great already, I think sneak is going to be a lot more valuable, because you will be able to sneak out of certain situations or around certain enemies. Sneak is going to be more important than it was before. My final point has to do with beds, and that may be really simple, but the fact is beds are your checkpoints now. You cannot manually save, otherwise you have to sleep for at least an hour. You know, that's the minimum you have to sleep, but you have to sleep in a bed in order to save your game. So you got to think now, a lot of the time, I'm sure a ton of us have just been playing Fallout and, oh, there's a bed on the ground, I'm not going to use that, it's not really useful to me. There's a bed, I don't really need to worry about it. Now you actually have to remember all those nasty bloodstained beds in random locations. They're useful to you now. Remember where these are, find out where they are. If you go into a new area, just be on the lookout for a bed, because you're probably going to need it. In the comment section below, I'd like to hear from you guys. For those who have played, you know, the survival mode, or those who have just watched some YouTube videos, some streamers, whatever it may be, what are your best tips for starting in this mode? Some ways to get people thinking about what they should be worrying about with all of these new mechanics and systems. Let me know what you guys are thinking in the comment section below. Alright guys, today I shared some beginner's tips for the new survival mode beta in Fallout 4, and next time we will cover more Fallout on my channel, so stay tuned for Fallout 4 tips and tricks videos. If you learned something new, remember to hit that like button, I would really appreciate it, and don't forget to subscribe for more survival mode coverage, Automatron DLC, and general tips and tricks videos. Talk to you guys next time. Peace.